So my name is Annie Newman. I am the governor's director of digital services, and we are hiring an executive director of the Commonwealth's first digital services team, which is very exciting. So we can introduce ourselves. Michaela, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. I'm Annie. We all took these government pictures when we started this job, so that's like a fun perk that we're looking at. But I'm Annie. I am the director of digital strategy. I was Governor Shapiro's digital director on his campaign, and prior to that, worked kind of for a bunch of Democratic candidates and committees, and also spent a few years with the Messina Group, working specifically in kind of digital advertising and technology and international elections, like Kenya and in the UK. Joe Lee, one of our deputy chiefs of staff for opportunity and administration, who is just an absolute amazing kind of partner in crime in all of this, and a huge just supporter of what we're trying to do here. He's just running a little late with dealing with something in the building, but that was Capitol speak, but dealing with something in the Capitol, and he'll be on when he can. But Joe is kind of a real champion of this team in the chief of staff's office, in the governor's office, so we're very lucky to have him. And then we also have Secretary Weaver with us, Secretary of the Office of Administration. So I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Andy. Yeah, there's nothing like seeing a large picture of yourself on the screen looking back at you. So, but thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us. And before we dive into it, I give a little bit of background. I've been in state government for about 16 years. This is the third governor I have worked for. I've been in the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Community and Economic Development, the governor's office, and now with Governor Shapiro as his Secretary of Administration. I've had a lot. I've seen a lot. I've been in the communications offices. I've been in the press office. I've been again in the governor's office, and I've been in executive offices at both Community Economic Development and now with the Office of Administration.
And I can just say that Secretary Weaver has been a massive ally in this kind of push to really modernize what we're doing here. And we'll tell you a little bit more about it on the next slide. So why we're here. We are, as I said, hiring an executive director for our first digital service team in the Commonwealth. We have a kind of a three-pronged approach here that has led us to hiring this team that I think will really set us up for success. The first is that Governor Shapiro understands what we are doing and understands why we need to do it. His first thought at me when he was like, I need you to take this job, is how are we going to make people's online experience better? And how are we going to actually promote trust in government? Because that is what this is. So we have a champion at the very top of our state government in Governor Shapiro that knows why we're doing this and believes we need to invest in it. We also have a chief of staff who I've been lucky to work with for a number of years and is completely aligned. The conversation to start this team was quick and it was easy because we knew it was important and we knew we needed to invest in it. Thirdly, we have our Office of Administration here who is dedicated to investing in these services. And Neil, I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about kind of your approach to the Office of Administration and how we are modernizing that and bringing this team about.
Sure. So it does, and to reiterate what Annie said is, we have buy-in and support, and I would say even more than support with Governor Shapiro, his chief of staff and his staff that he's put in place, and great people like Annie who we've had the opportunity to work with and really move this quickly. As we know, sometimes things don't move that quickly in government, but this administration is taking things very seriously and moving very quickly on things just like the digital office. So the Office of Administration oversees all administrative support we have about 78,000 employees in the Commonwealth. So we do all the HR, we do all the IT, we do continuity of services, we do EEO, we have a number of processes. So we have about a staff of about 2,500. We've got 1,500 IT staff. We've got about 1,000 HR staff. And again, those are full-time. So we do have some others that are in there too, but we also have more than 700 contractors on the IT side that we work with. What we see as this position, and I'm sure Andy will get in a little bit deeper, but from where I sit, we have an amazing opportunity. to really transform Pennsylvania and what we're delivering to both internal and external customers. It's really important that we're looking at both to make sure we're making a difference for not just those in the public outside, but also inside state government and what we're doing for them. So we've been looking at that as well. The office, the digital director will sit in the Office of Administration, will report directly to Annie and to our CIO. And we've done that directly and really deliberately. We want to make sure that this person has the ability to get things done and has the support of the highest staff that we have. So the CIO reports to me, and I work with Joe Lee very closely, our Deputy Chief of Staff. So you really, this position will be surrounded by people that want it to survive and want it to support it and do it and move it quickly. Again, we are moving at light speed, this administration. Other administrations have tried iterations, and I'm not slighting those, but this is really getting legs, and it's really exciting from us. You know, one thing that we talked to the governor about is, you know, from the administration side, HR and IT, is creating a workforce for the 21st century. And so we need to be looking at that. Where is that? That's in the digital space. And so we need to know that we're supporting it. So this position has our full support. We want it to build a digital experience that is like no other. And we're willing to do that and ready to do it. So Annie, I'll turn it back to you if that's, or if you have any other questions for me.
That was perfect. Thank you, Secretary. Awesome. So I would love to go to the next slide and I just kind of talk us through a little bit. Perfect. That was great. But talk us through a little bit like what the team that we are envisioning is, how far along we are on that, and what we're looking for in an executive director. So I want to start off by saying executive director, the job that we're hiring for today, sits at the top of this team. And you know, I swear this will be the last time I say it, but we really have the buy-in and the kind of flexibility to make this team what we believe is going to be the best. What I'm going to show you right now is sort of what we are currently thinking about, what we're tossing around as to what this could be after talking to experts in the field like Kristen and Krista and our allies at the White House and other states. But I do want to emphasize that our executive director is going to make this team their own. So please don't feel any of this is set in stone. But just to emphasize the scale of what we're looking at, we are hiring this executive director. Later in March, after the ED is hired, we are going to go ahead and start a search for kind of senior leadership of this team, which we see as being front-end development, operations, product management, user experience, back-end development, and quality assurance. Operations director is down there because I didn't have space long ways, so that means nothing. But if you go to the next slide here, this is what we see as what a full team within 2 years, within maybe even 18 months, could look like. We have a lot of work to do, and we think that we need to essentially structure ourselves like the best tech companies out there in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia, and bring that into the Commonwealth to do it. So we envision having project teams of product managers, front-end developers, UX designers, content strategists, back-end designers, and then building an analyst team of quality assurance or under a quality assurance banner. We have an operations director envisioned that would really make sure that we have buy-in from stakeholders in the office and in the government to make sure that everyone on the team has what they need and are communicating clearly. And we have a DevOps team who, you know, I think in large part we already have existing in the Commonwealth in a really large office of technology that can make sure that we are scaling, that we are in the cloud, that all of the, frankly, like cloud technology that I don't understand is taken care of. If you go to the next slide, the positions in blue are the positions that we have the green light to hire right away. So we're going to put these into the field as soon as we can. We plan on kind of hiring this group using, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but creating some pilot projects that our executive director believes are the best kind of show of force for what this team can do and how we can make the most impact to Governor Shapiro's agenda, and then build out the rest of the team in short order. So, you know, this person, we're going to be starting a new team here, and this person will do a lot of strategic work on the front end to do it. But it is really important to us that the eventual role has the support they need quickly. And that means hiring these people quickly, which we're committed to doing. So to the next slide here. A little bit more about the executive director we're searching for. We are really looking for someone that can take this team and take this vision and make it their own and say, this is what I'd like to do. This is where we see success in the private sector, in cities and states and countries that do this work better than we do, and where we can make most advantageous use of the governor's agenda. So we're looking for someone that can really run the strategic direction, that can have a significant amount of involvement with stakeholders. As Secretary Weaver said, I think a real part about bringing this team into government is that we have the full force of some, senior folks within the Commonwealth behind us, but we need to make sure that we are continuing those relationships, that we are, reporting effectively, and that we are using the force that we're building to really further the governor's agenda. The executive director will be the mouthpiece for that. And ultimately ensure that we are, improving our experience navigating services and increasing the trust in government. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but the position will identify and vet any vendor relationships, a growth plan. They will be the final call on hiring, and they will direct these teams that do everything that you see on the screen. I hate to read it at you, but they're going to run the show. As Secretary Weaver said, they'll report directly to the state CIO, and they'll co-report to myself in the governor's office. So they will have kind of ample opportunity and ample mouthpieces, I guess, to make sure that what they need, they are getting. I also just noticed that, I'll take a break and say, our Deputy Chief of Staff, Joe Lee, joined. We love Joe Lee. Hi, Joe. We were bragging about you earlier and talking about how great you are. But if you want to just take a minute to say hi and kind of give a little bit about your background, what you do here.
Yeah, absolutely. And my sincere apologies to the group running a little bit late. My name is Julie, Deputy Chief of Staff, overseeing government operations and finance. I'm very excited to partner with Annie Newman and Secretary Weaver here on setting up this team, which the governor is very excited about. So we're excited that there's interest, and thank you all for joining us.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. And if you wouldn't mind just going to the last slide here. This is really the core part of what we envision the executive director doing in their first month. And frankly, first month is probably optimistic. First 2 months, first several weeks. They are going to finalize a hiring timeline and an org chart. I just showed you kind of a template that we've used, that we've brainstormed on. They're going to take that and use their expertise to make that real and to tell us what they need so we can make it happen for them. They'll identify pilot projects. We've done some groundwork here and really kind of started to socialize this idea with other secretaries, with other departments, and try to find pilot projects that could best create opportunity for Pennsylvanians and also further the governor's agenda, and also give this team a chance to really find its legs. But the executive director will decide what those are and tell us what they need to accomplish them. And they'll create, a strategic growth plan. This really goes into both of those two things, but as Secretary Weaver said, we've moved really fast, and we think this team can scale very quickly as well. So deciding the chart, charting the path to do that will be how we spend our time before we have everyone in the door and are cranking away on these really important service projects. I will throw to Secretary Weaver any other insight that you have on kind of how this person will spend their first few weeks on the job.
No, I think, Annie, just to pick up where you left off a little bit. So what we do is we'll bring this person in very quickly and get them acclimated. We'll make sure that they have all the resources they need right on day one. We'll obviously work with them before they get on board and make sure that we're provided everything they need. Again, we'll get the person acclimated here within the Office of Administration, making sure everything's taken care of. Obviously, over in the governor's office, making sure that you will understand who everyone is and where they are and how to get in touch with them. And sitting down with Annie, myself, and Joe, and to really, hash this out about what it looks like and what are those first couple of weeks going to be. I think they're going to be really busy. Again, we're moving quickly. We have, the governor has a very ambitious agenda, and this person is going to be very, very instrumental to that. So I think, just getting in and being ready to start on day one is most important.
Totally. Thank you, Secretary. Mickey, I got a question in the chat that I think is really helpful. Michaela, would you mind going back to the org chart slide, that full org chart? Perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about just how we envision the executive director getting the support that they need, kind of navigating all sides of this government equation, and where that will come from. So as we said, the executive director will report to the state CIO and myself. Point blank, we will be there for all things kind of procurement, vendors, government policy, stakeholder introduction, all of that kind of good stuff. The operations director here, I think, will be one of the first hires, and I think will be a very core member of the team and a specialized background. That person is really going to make sure that they have the stakeholder engagement in check, that they're working with our Department of General Services and probably very closely with Joe Lee in making sure that we have the vendors, the tech, the tools that we need. And then the head of product management here is going to play an important role with our operations director on figuring out exactly how all of those stakeholders communicate with this team. One thing that we heard really clearly from kind of folks that we, talked about this template with, that we researched this with, is that while we need to kind of protect our team from some of the craziness of government and all of the many, many needs and wants, they also need to have their ear to the ground with those people and understand exactly what they need and when. So that's something that the head of product management will really have a hand in and work closely with our operations director to achieve. The operations director will also handle things like marketing, administration that goes under that. We've envisioned an associate role under that. That associate role could grow. So the executive director should have the time and the space to really build the strategic vision for this program. We will make sure that you have the support that you need on the operations side and the management side. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer. But outside of that, happy to answer any questions here.
I'll get things started as we wait for some questions to come in the chat, and I'll just articulate that. If you'd like to ask a question, please drop it in the chat so we can read it aloud. Then it's shared in our recording of this event. But then also, if you'd like to ask it anonymously or privately, you can send it directly to me, and then we won't attribute it to you, but we'll read it aloud for the recording. So, I'm going to share here in the chat again the job application and the job description. Could you share with us just what are some of the big and exciting goals or services that you have in mind that you'd like this position to tackle? Loved hearing about all of the support and the buy-in that is out there, but are there some projects that are most exciting or most interesting for you and the governor that you are hoping that this office will tackle, especially in the first year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we all probably have some answers that we've been coddling and waiting to kind of make our passion project. I will just say, I think the governor has made his defining agenda really creating opportunity for Pennsylvanians. That's the ability to get a job, have a good paying job, provide for your family and childcare while you're doing so, access to healthcare. So we really see a suite of services surrounding that work that could be first priority. Examples of that is making the application process to get a license or certification way easier. And that's, kind of goes along with registering a new business, registering a business name. That whole suite of services needs a real revamp and is something that we're really passionate about upgrading. I'll add kind of lastly that the governor literally asked me this morning about upgrading our election services. So making sure that not only folks can register to vote much easier, because it's really a nightmare in Pennsylvania, but our services like campaign finance reform, reporting, the suite of sort of democracy services, as I've been calling them, I think is a real priority for us and one we'd love to tackle. Joe, curious if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Annie, just wondering, have you already talked about life experiences and how we're kind of approaching this for your model?
No,
Okay,
that's a great flag.
Okay, great. So some of you may be aware at the federal level that they're really keen, and I apologize for any background noise here. I do share an office with 5 other folks, but some of you may be aware of this life experience model where if you are expecting a child, if you are a new resident of Pennsylvania, if you were incarcerated and getting out of of prison. Those are life experiences where you might not necessarily know which agency to go to and what the whole suite of services might be that Pennsylvania needs to offer in that life moment. And I think one of the key assets to having this digital service executive director will be to kind of stitch together digitally where we all have those services and kind of present that in a coherent and cohesive way to the every Pennsylvanian that might be experiencing that life moment. And so to Annie's point about kind of intersections with the governor's priorities, I think as we interact with the governor's policy team, and we want to make sure that there's active tissue between this individual and the policy team, that those conversations are not only happening, but we can tee up some of these digital services and a launch of some of these digital interfaces that might intersect with, for example, the governor's a new initiative and workforce. We can just have that digital presence be ready to go so that when we are ready to announce it with an executive order or legislation or whatever the case may be, we're already there. We've done our homework and we're kind of ready to go. I will also, I saw the question on accessibility here, and do you mind, Kirsten, if I kind of tackle that one?
Yeah, no, go for it. That's great. And
okay.
If you wouldn't mind just summarizing the question so our recording includes it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question says, how will accessibility be prioritized as far as knowledge, background, experience of what you ask for from candidates for various job descriptions? I think accessibility is very front end of where we want to be, and certainly from like digital services perspective, it's important for folks to come with a perspective on accessibility and what that means for them personally. Also, like how we can better serve Pennsylvanians better in this space. So we're not only talking about folks with disabilities, any type of disability, but also accessibility from like a language perspective, right? Folks who might be Spanish speakers, we want to make sure that they're, we're digitally addressing those as well. So that's very important to us. We also have a chief accessibility officer here in the Commonwealth, and I imagine that this individual would work very closely with the chief accessibility officer, as well as our digital director within OA, who is bilingual, who has done a ton of work in terms of making sure that the content that we put out as a Commonwealth is accessible in multiple different languages. So that's something that is very important to us.
Thank you. We have a question here about flexibility you're able to offer members of the team in order to recruit talent from across Pennsylvania. And then the note that it is hard to pull talent for digital services, even without requiring everyone to be in Harrisburg all week. I will drop into the chat here the language about telework, but if you could expand on that a little bit more to answer this question.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly and then kind of pass it to Joe and Secretary Weaver that we need to start a team like this. I think the first thing that we said to our chief of staff was that we have to be able to match what talent we need. And that means remote work. So I think a position like this will probably have to be in Harrisburg sometimes. It will not have to be in Harrisburg every day of the week by any stretch of the imagination. And we have some flexibility with regional offices with what work from home is in a legal sense. So I think the TLDR that I would love to share here is that please apply if you are concerned about what a remote schedule looks like. We can be flexible, and we have the kind of go ahead to be flexible from Secretary Weaver, from our chief of staff, and from the governor. That might mean a different thing to everybody, but that's what I got.
Yeah, I will just to add on to that, will also say that I think, especially in the initial few weeks, months, I think some of that in-person interaction will be really valuable. We want to make sure that we take the individual and make sure that they meet all their counterparts and kind of are plugged into different ecosystems of conversations that are happening across different policy spaces or IT spaces. And so I think, especially in the initial few weeks and months, I think we want some Harrisburg, not residents necessarily, but being in Harrisburg for a few days out of the week, maybe 2 or 3, we can kind of be flexible here. But to Annie's point, I think more broadly and kind of more long term, we would definitely open to conversations about a more even more flexible telework arrangement than necessarily being in Harrisburg 3 days out of the week. And as someone who, as someone who moved to Harrisburg, that did not imagine being in Harrisburg, came from Philly and DC and Baltimore, lived for a little bit in New York City. I totally understand this question is coming from, but Harrisburg does have some names, I will say.
It does. It does get pretzel. I will just it came right out of my head. I will just add that the more information that you can give us about this, about like what you need, the better. We are very committed to making sure that you're comfortable in the setting. So.
We have some great questions that came in directly about measuring success of the role in the team. And then, so how will that measurement be determined? And then what are some of the top challenges that you see right out of the gate for this position to be successful?
Yeah, I can kind of throw some thoughts as to both of those things. I think measurement of success ultimately, and I'm thinking in my mind of the governor that we have and the senior staff behind him and our cabinet secretaries as well, is that are we making a difference in the lives of Pennsylvanians? And that totally sounds like cheesy and lame, and I get that. But I think for all of us, that is very much what this team is. This is something that will make people's lives easier to access services that they need. So whether that is like cleaning up a form, or as Joe said, really revolutionizing our online presence around life events, or if it is just taking a digital service and mixing it and modernizing it, any of those things on any scale is a success. And I think as we kind of dive into this team, especially at the onset, we want to work really closely with the executive director to make sure that we are picking pilot projects that set them up for success. A challenge is a good question. I think, look, I mean, I kind of wrote this on my little note before we did this. I think like this is in any situation of like moving into the public sector role, like it's not going to be a cakewalk, certainly. I mean, like we've all worked in the private sector, and like, you know, there are benefits in a real way. But I think our administration, and I'm not just saying this because I am in it, is like very much kind of set for success in this role. There is no one that we have spoken with or worked with on this team that has presented a conflict or a pushback. And it's just because most of us do come from outside of government. We are a team that knows what we don't know and knows that what we do know is our strength. That's a convoluted way of saying that, but true. So I think it's going to be a challenge to enter government. I think it is for anyone, and it was for me coming from the private sector and coming from campaign world. But I think that if you're going to do it, my shameless plug is that if you're going to do it, this is the right team and the right administration to do it with. So that's probably my two answers. I don't know if Secretary Weaver or Joe, if you have thoughts there.
Yeah, I do, Annie, thanks. So from someone that, like I said, has come from government over about 16 years, a long time. You know, I've seen iterations of trying to get something like this off the ground. And again, I think you're going to hear a recurring theme is that we now have that opportunity. We have that opportunity for someone to come in and really take ownership of this, understand what it is. And, you know, I think one of the challenges, quite frankly, is going to be which pilot projects and what projects you tackle. In addition to what Joe and Annie talked about, from a human resource side, you know, the governor is very committed to making sure the 78,000 employees we have all the opportunities that folks do in the private sector. And how do we look at that from a digital side? How do we get them in the door to apply for jobs? When they apply for jobs, what's that look like? Are we making it more difficult? What does that front end look like? So I think, you know, there's a number of challenges, but I think this is going to be, for the right person, is going to be an amazing opportunity. Again, in filling these roles, I think, and you know, creating a team is going to be great, and it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and if I could add on to both Kate Weaver and Annie's points, make no mistakes, will be very challenging, but it's for the kind of person that is looking for a challenge, and perhaps y'all might have experience in the private sector and want to give the public sector a shot. And we can certainly, like Annie, myself, Trey Weaver, and frankly, everyone on the team will be there to support you as you navigate the procurement process, as you navigate, someone asked a question about IT. We can definitely, shed some light on that. And also you have the benefit that having visibility here in the governor's office, we will be able to muscle through things where you might be facing impediments. And so whether that's from HR or IT, I mean, the benefit of having this team within OA is the fact that Secretary Weaver oversees HR and IT for the Commonwealth. So there are benefits here, and we've strategically kind of put this team within OA for that reason. But rest assured that we will be able to support you and as you face these challenges, and you won't be encountering these challenges on your own. We'll be there hand in hand to walk you through and muscle through, frankly, if need be, any impediments that you might face.
Great question. What percentage of the job do you expect to be bureaucracy hacking, and what percentage will be shipping software?
That's a great question.
I've never heard the term bureaucracy hacking.
I know.
I don't know exactly what that means. I'm sorry.
I think so. There's actually a great book, and we'll share the link in the chat. But it's this idea of kind of breaking down legacy systems, ways of doing business, and modernizing them, often with technology, but sometimes without technology. So how are you taking, the way we've always done it and changing that up? How are we finding the places where Pennsylvanians are reaching a stalemate or having some challenge, and then finding a new way to deliver that service. So again, I think it's also cutting red tape and lots of different ways that people have said it over the years.
Yeah, Annie, if I can take a shot at that from, at least from the agency side, when you hire, and when the person hires the operations director and manager, they're going to be someone that does have access and understands the roles within the state. And again, you have myself, you've got Joe, you've got Annie. We are going to make sure that you're not hitting those roadblocks, that there isn't bureaucracy, because we all know there is, and it exists in every government, no matter local or state or federal. It just is what it is. But we're going to make sure that these folks don't have a problem with that. We know state inside and out. We know where there could be roadblocks or where there could be concerns. I can tell you that from my agency, folks know that this is coming. They know that we're going to be doing that. We've socialized it with them. People think it's a great idea. And they understand that this is a priority, as though the folks in human resources. So I think they're excited about it. So from our end, and I'll let Joe and Annie speak from their end, but on our end, we're going to have someone that really can show you the ropes inside and out. We don't want this person, Annie and Joe may disagree, but we don't want this person tied down by issues of bureaucracy. We know how to navigate that, and in the positions that we hold, we're able to make sure that you don't encounter those issues. But we don't want this person to be worried about that. We want this person to be fully committed to doing what they're being asked to do and to deliver, and we will take care of all the other pieces and ancillary issues that you can run into.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's like a lovely way of saying it. Like, part of our responsibility, I think, in even suggesting, pitching, and then creating this team is exactly what Secretary Weaver just said. I don't think we would have done it if we didn't feel we were empowered by the governor, by our chief of staff, by the highest folks in the Commonwealth to do this and to really allow the executive director to do the work they need to do. So, I think we'll run into roadblocks along the way. You do in any job, and we'll work through them together. But I do think that Secretary Weaver is absolutely right.
Yeah, totally agree there. I will say, to the extent possible, let your, when you're ready to hire the operations director, that person should be absorbing a lot of this bureaucratic pain, if there is any, and taking that pain away from the executive director, to Annie's earlier point about making sure that the executive director has the bandwidth to focus on strategy and the vision for the organization. And then also just rely on us. I rely on Secretary Weaver, myself, and Annie to help also absorb the pain, the bureaucratic pains if they exist, and let us help you navigate through that process. I will also say that I've been in the private sector and now in the public sector again, and that's, I think, part of the fun of in the public sector is navigating through, some of the red tape and the bureaucracy, and oh wow, there's this, random piece of legislation that requires us to do this, and kind of as you peel back the onion layers more and more, sometimes you'll have these mind-blowing moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe the Commonwealth, does this, or there's this piece of regulation out there, and you will definitely guarantee, we can guarantee you that you will have those moments. But I think that's part of the fun of being in the public sector, that this won't be necessarily easy, but the navigating through the politics and also through the red tape, to Kirsten's earlier point, I think, and your ability to be successful and navigate through that, I think will be a really good trait to have.
A question came in. There's so much excitement. I think that org chart probably made everyone on this call just, eyes, big and bright and excited about the fact that you're supporting this and you're also going to staff it. Is there wiggle room or flexibility if someone's looking at that and, from their experience, they know they're going to need somebody to focus on policy or engagement or training? Is there going to be flexibility in that org chart to maybe move some of those boxes around and hire for the team that they see needing?
Please, yes. I debated not putting that org chart in because I didn't want anyone on this call to think like, oh, we mandated this and already enshrined it before you got there, and that's just not the case. But I did it exactly to your point, just to show that we want to scale this largely. Yes, there is absolutely nothing set in stone. We want you to come to us and say, this is bad. This is why you're not the executive director of this team. This is why I'm the executive director of this team. And here's a job that I'm going to add to it. So yes, it is entirely flexible. We are committed to making sure that you have that leadership help as quickly as possible. So that's a real part of it, but yes, very flexible. And I'm glad you asked.
And then a quick question. Can you talk more about how this team interacts with the existing IT organization, and then specifically the current security and compliance organization?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So again, we've got about 1,500 full-time IT employees and about a little more than 700 contractors. So we will staff up where needed, and you will have access to the CIO, the CTO, the chief information, everybody that you need will be at your disposal to work with. So really, like I said before, this position will report up through the CIO and to Annie and myself through the CIO. And I think we will make sure that you have access to who you need on the IT side. We will be located where we are, where our IT folks are. We'll make, so I don't think, I don't know if I answered it right, but I don't think there's going to be any issue on the IT side. Again, reporting to the CIO makes all the difference because that person that we're going to work with is going to be able to move around assets, going to be able to move around resources and folks that you might need and take it from there.
Yeah, and totally agree with Secretary Weaver, and also I think with the direct reporting relationship, CIO, the CISO and CTO also report to the CIO, and so I think making sure that there's regular cadence of conversations that are happening with the CTO, CISO at kind of the statewide level, just to kind of, again, to the earlier point about understanding what the IT environment looks like within the Commonwealth and helping to navigate through that, and also addressing any security issues that might come up. I think that those relationships and conversations will be really valuable, and of course with OA's legal as well.
We have a question here about on the application. It says 6 years of experience, and this person is asking, that seems oddly specific. Can you speak to that requirement and the intent behind it? Is this one of those lovely government requirements where you must specify a period of time, or is there something else that applicants should be aware of?
I think it is the latter. There are some specific, and Joe can kind of correct me. There are some like specifics in how we do our hiring processes, but I would just say that like as someone that is notorious for applying for jobs and ignoring the year requirement, if you feel like that doesn't reflect kind of your abilities and what you bring to the table, please apply anyway. We are reviewing every application and every resume, but some process stuff.
Yeah, I would say that it is odd specific, and that is just with the quirks of Commonwealth hiring. So our apologies about that. But I would say take an expansive view of what your level of experience would look like and what would kind of match what we are looking for. So to the extent that that is helpful for you, but I do recognize that that is pretty specific. And also, if I could follow up on the IT question. So Chris Alfano said, having access to IT resources isn't the usual barrier stifling digital service teams. It's dated policies and processes that the IT organization is unwilling to be flexible on. There will be a need, a strong mandate from the top that the IT organization finds ways to serve digital service needs. 1,000% agree. And part of, I think, what the value for this position is identifying some of those and bring those to our level. And if we need to prioritize updating certain policies and processes above others, so we can push this through, we are very open to having those types of conversations with the Always policy director as well as Always team.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that clarification. And, I think one of my takeaways is, I think if we waited until everything was perfect, then you would be waiting 2 more years to hire a digital services executive director. You're in a position where you want to move and you want to get things done. And most importantly, as I think Annie very clearly articulated, there's a lot of support. You have everyone from the Secretary of Administration to the chiefs of staff to the governor saying that this position is important. I know that it would be great to be able to say that you'll be able to walk in and have, carte blanche to do whatever you want, but there are bureaucracies to work in. And so just really appreciate both the observation by our guests today that yes, sometimes there are impediments that make digital services hard, but that you also are sharing that you're going to do everything you can to make the position successful. A really great question that aligns directly with that. In 6 months to 1 year, what are the headlines that you would love to see in the news about the success of this team?
Could mouth off about that. I love that. Great question. I'd like to see them literally on my office wall, just kind of paste it up with tape. So I think it's hard to not compare us to other states that have done this really, really well. We spent a lot of time with those other states and kind of looking at their products. I would like to see, and New York, Oklahoma recently have come out with some really incredible programs that have people calling them the most digitally accessible state in the game. I would like to win that title. I'm very competitive. But I think headlines that, Pennsylvania transforms its online infrastructure. It's easier than ever to start a business in Pennsylvania. It's easier than ever to get state-funded childcare. I didn't know that I had access to these small business grants. Now I do. And here's a website where I found out. I think those are going to be there's a competitiveness of me, and that's true. But I think headlines like that, that's we didn't know how much the state could provide for us, and now we do, are something that I can't wait to see and have every confidence that we will.
So I would love to see, from my vantage point, for it to say, Pennsylvania transforms and is now a leader of digital technology. I would love to see that. I think in all areas that would affect what we're doing, and I think it puts us on the map. Again, going back to the 21st century workforce, but it's also what we're doing on technology side. So that's kind of where I would lead it. I'd love them on my wall as well.
Yeah, and if I can add, the competitive streak is alive and well with me as well. And I will say that, and that kind of applies to two instances, but the first, there's a digital service ecosystem that I know is very vibrant and robust, and we're very fortunate to be tapping into that ecosystem right now with our partnership with Beeck and SDR. But within that digital service ecosystem, I want Pennsylvania to be recognized as a leader in this space. To Annie and Secretary Weaver's points. And then secondly, I think you are going to start to naturally see some of this work play out in media, especially as those connections with policy priorities start to happen and we start to release, new digital products that align with those policy priorities. And so I would say, do not be surprised when some of your work is direct cited or directly hyperlinked within media articles that come out, especially when we're ready to launch new policy priorities along the way.
All right, and I think we have time for one more question. The person writes, this will be a relatively small team to start. What role do you see professional services firms playing with this team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of our genesis for creating this team is that we found as soon as we entered office, there were a lot of these very bloated, very broad contracts that really set no one up for success and ultimately didn't really get the job done. I absolutely think part of the value in bringing this team on are having folks that know what they're looking for, that are better placed to entertain and create these contracts and vendors for these specific services. So I agree. Their team is going to be small at the start. There's a pilot team, and hopefully it won't be small for long. As fast as we can hire people, we will. But absolutely a role for a strategic use of vendors and outside consultants for specific projects. And I think by utilizing them in that way, we can do it way more cost effectively and have, frankly, just more efficient project dates with them.
To Annie's point, I think we really do want to help develop this talent in-house and build that muscle and capability in-house. Right now, we just don't have that. And if strategic ways in which we can leverage in kind of a very sharp scalpel way, certain projects that may need vendor to come in to help and assist just because we don't have the capacity yet. I'm very open to those types of conversations. But the ultimate goal, to Annie's point, is we have seen a lot of these contracts and we're not necessarily, the performance of some of these are very mixed. And so part of the initiative here is to make sure that we do have this in talent that we can just deploy rapidly, no matter depending on the need from the governor's office.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I hope everyone can join me in thanking Annie, Neil, and Joe for joining us on today's webinar. As Joe mentioned, there is a digital services ecosystem, and the Digital Service Network is really proud to be pulling people together and convening opportunities like today, also sharing out resources and best practices and research. So if you haven't yet already, please join us, register for the DSN. We're also really excited to hopefully be a huge helper and friend to the Pennsylvania Digital Service as the new executive director begins the hiring process for that incredible team that they'll be putting together. We would love feedback on today's event. So if you have a minute, please use the link in the chat to offer some feedback about how today went. It's our hope that as more state and local teams are building out digital services capability, that we'll be here to help share those opportunities. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Pennsylvania team for being so creative and innovative, developing out this new opportunity to improve the lives of Pennsylvanians. And thanks to all of our attendees for being here. We really value the work that you do. We know that the work you do is difficult and hard, but it is so meaningful. And that's why we are so pleased at the DSN to support you. So thanks so much, and look forward to hearing from the Pennsylvania team about the wonderful new executive director that they get hired into this role, and then helping tell stories about their success, hopefully the DSN can publish some headlines that Annie and Joe can paste to their walls to show the success of this project. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.